Right now, the world is in a crisis. We all know. The truth is, world leaders are wondering what to do. If we ever doubted that the world is in a crisis, COVID showed us exactly where we were at. It showed what we did not know, what we were not ready for, the fact that superior thinking is needed, the fact that more heads are needed doing the thinking. We could see the state America was in, we could see the state England was in. To be honest, most countries that were not led by women, we could see the states they were in at that time. So the world is in a crisis. There's that on one side, the fact that we're not even in a post-pandemic era yet. We're right in the middle of solving a problem, which is a pandemic, almost unprecedented in our lifetime. There's that. There's also the fact that boatloads of Africans are turning up on the shores of Europe daily, dying as they make the trip, as they make the crossing. What's going on? We have problems with food insecurity in Africa. We have problems with sustainability in construction, and we have climate change issues. We have youth who are up in arms, protesting all over the world, thinking that they have a generation that has gone ahead who do not care anything about them. In one word, they are saying that we've forgotten that our countries are not our rights or our inheritances. They're the legacies we're meant to give to our children. Therefore, Nigeria, for instance, which is the country I come from, is not my inheritance. It's my son's legacy. And that's the way my generation and the generations before me and the generations to come need to begin to look at the problems of the world. Why must Africa then evolve its own solutions? There's several reasons. Number one, we need to hear the voice of Africa, and Africa is the one coping with the problems. Whenever we import solutions, these solutions are usually ill-fitting. I say to people, you have to walk in my moccasins for a mile to know where the shoe pinches. You cannot project on me what you think the answers are. So when these solutions are projected through aid, development aid, in fact, the very model is usually flawed. Projected through all these ways, we end up with issues. Let me give you a story. So, some very well-thinking development specialists landed in an African country, and they were at the banks of the river, and they said, wow, the river soil is so fantastic to grow tomatoes. How come these people don't grow tomatoes and they bring tomatoes from the next town to this town? They must not be thinking right. They must be daft Africans. So they grew tomatoes by the waterside. It was amazing. These tomatoes were lush. They came out looking beautiful until one day close to harvest time, or one night, should I say. And then they had a stampede, and the next day they got there, all the tomato farms were ruined. Why? Because the hippos came in from the water, and they trampled on them and they ate them. And the locals laughed and said, this is why we don't grow tomatoes. You didn't ask us. The story is told of yet another set of development specialists who land in this place in the Middle East. And they say the women do not have potable water. They're struggling, going to the well. We need to help them. We need to solve the problem. And then they got tap-borne water into the villages. And the women were in distress. So one day, a woman calls one of the developmental specialists and says, we go to the well to fetch water, because that's the only time when we are away from our husbands, and then we can confide in our sisters, and that's our own therapy. That's why that community did not need a shrink, because they got their daily shrink, their daily therapy from the well. So it wasn't about pipe-borne water. What I'm saying is, when you step into other people's ecosystem without understanding the dynamics that is beyond infrastructural, there are other things going on. There are issues of aspiration, the zeitgeist, culture, socio-cultural issues, geopolitical issues, sociological issues. We usually come up with half-baked solutions that are like band-aids that just fix a part of the problem. So I was saying to them at MIT Solve, it was a fantastic solution somebody was proposing for climate change. Of course, what should we do? Have a folding car, a car with a little footprint that runs on batteries. Never mind that the cobalt from the batteries is going to come from Congo. And we know how much the people are paid, $1.03 an hour to bring out the cobalt that we need for the batteries. And then Congo is in what it is because of the pandemonium it is, because of the resources. And never mind the fact that the resources are Congo and Africa dependent, and the people are not being taken care of. Let's put it, it's not equitable, it's not fair. Let's forget that. But it's a technology that does not even think of the back end, but it's a folding car. And I said to them, that's very interesting, a folding car. That most people in Africa, when they go back home at Christmas with a folding car, their mothers are going to lose it, because it's like you went to the city really and you came back with a folding car, not a Hummer, not the kind of car James Bond drives. You came back with a folding car. So I said, you have to understand the people's aspirations. I said, till James Bond drives a Tesla in the next movie, which he didn't, by the way, I've watched it, then we're not going to begin to solve the world, these problems, because pop culture is saying one thing, the ivory towers are saying something else. So all the solutions will continue to be experimental and live in the laboratories and the museums until pop culture buys into it. And pop culture is only going to buy into it when you sell it at every level, at the movie level, at every level. Africa must evolve its own solutions. Number one, because only Africa understands Africa. And when we say Africa, we're not talking about skin color. We're talking about those who identify with Africa, live in Africa. So you could have the skin color that most Africans have, but you're not an African because you're not a son of the soil or a daughter of the soil. You don't dance to his rhythms. You don't walk in his moccasins. You don't understand his zeitgeist. You don't understand his aspirations. Then having African DNA does not make you African. And not having African DNA does not make you non-African. If you resonate with Africa and its rhythms. So, one, we need to evolve our solutions because only we understand where the shoe pinches. Two, you have to be in the mindset of an African to be able to communicate with the African and to fix the problems that an African has. Three, we can't keep dumping solutions on Africa because they might be ill-fitting. It's like wearing somebody's used clothes that don't fit. Like wearing ill-fitting clothes. That's what it comes to at the end of the day. If Africa is to solve its own problems, it will have to leapfrog. We cannot go through the same process that the West went through. Try coal, then try petroleum, then try different fossil fuels before we come to alternative sources of energy, for instance. We can try to build exclusively in concrete, then build with materials hauled from all over the globe before we know that what we have to use are homegrown solutions that are renewable, or before we subscribe to the circular economy. So Africa must evolve its own solutions because the entire globe is going to be in trouble. If the burgeoning, aspiring middle class that's growing in Africa now, the 70% that are under the age of 25, begin to build, begin to buy cars, begin to build a lifestyle after the aspirations of the West, with a massive inferiority complex that we have on our shoulders, sold to us by neo-colonialists. And everybody wants to be like the West. If we continue in that way, we are going to sink the entire globe. Climate change is going to be a joke compared to what we have now. Africa must evolve its own solutions because it used to have its own solutions and it worked. Africa was the crucible of civilization at some point. Not even North Africa, not Egypt. We're talking about Greater Zimbabwe, talking about the empires of Mali, talking about the Yoruba Empire, talking about empires that spanned countries now. We made things work. We had our diplomacy. We lived in war and peace and solved our own issues. We had, contrary to what some people say, that we had no concept of rights before colonialization, we did. Where I'm a Yoruba woman, where we came from, slaves had rights. Jaja Vokobo, who became a king in the Niger Delta region, was a slave and he rose to be king. We had a concept of everything and it worked. It worked. We could broker peace and engage in war, and it worked before the Magna Carta was signed in Europe. So Africa actually has what it takes to evolve its own solutions if the rest of the world would encourage that, maybe by stepping out of the way, maybe by stopping this, maybe by losing this idea that Africa is a huge market where you can dump your solutions, your GMOs, dump your solutions that the West will not take because they will kick back on it. Africa, we need to stop looking at Africa as this huge market that is waiting to be tapped. There was a time when Africa was looked on as this huge market, and we're in this mess because of it. When imperialists looked at Africa as a huge source of labor, of natural resources, and that's all we represented. And what did we have? The problems of slavery, problems of race issues. Every time when the rest of the globe does not see Africa as what it is, equal human beings with equal civilization who have solutions, we end up creating legacy issues down the line. 50 years, 100 years down the line, we have problems that there are no solutions for.